half of the breeding herds that we have in our program have never seen PEDV, right? Never. And then a small percentage of them have seen it. Well, I shouldn't say a small, 30% of them have seen it once. My message is, if we are concerned with, if I eliminate it today, what are the likelihood of me getting reinfected? It's very low. It's extremely low. So I think, again, that talks about the success that everybody in the industry, all their work is providing to keep this virus at bay. So I think, again, we are still on the road to success, and we have been successful. And hey, we just need to push a little bit further to get it done.
This episode is exclusively sponsored by Boehringer Ingelheim.
Welcome to At the Meeting. My name is Montse Torremorell, and I have with me Tom and Gordon. Good morning.
Hey,
good
hi,
morning.
Monty.
Hello, Monty.
Gordon,
good morning, Monty.
Good to see our guests with us today here.
Yes.
Yes, it's great to see you. So in one of our recent recordings, we were talking about the momentum that it's building in the US around the subject of PED elimination, in part driven by the efforts of the ASV PED Elimination Task Force, and also the resolution that passed at the last US SHIP House of Delegates to explore the potential for a PED certification program as part of US SHIP. So that momentum is building on PED elimination. So what we wanted to do today is to talk more about the information that is already available to get us started and get a sense for what we know about PED distribution in the US. So to do that, we have invited Dr. Cesar Corzo, who is the Leman Chair in Swine Health and Productivity at the University of Minnesota. Cesar also directs the Morrison Swine Health Monitoring Project, and his group, and together the others at the University of Minnesota, they've done quite a bit of data analysis on PED. So we wanted to have this conversation with you, Cesar. Welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Monty. Good morning, Tom and Gordon. Happy to see you and happy to be here.
So, Cesar, some of the work or the data that you're looking at, that's already started even with Dr. Bob Morrison with the MSHIM project to try to quantify how much PED or other viruses we had in the US. So can you give us a high-level overview about what the data tell us in the distribution of PED right now?
The data that we've been looking at is the collaborative effort of MSHIM participants, MSHIM associated clinics, in the sense that they are reporting to the program how many herds break with PEDV and how many herds clean PEDV on a weekly basis, right? So as of today, we have data for pretty much 10 years, right? Since the emergence of the disease in the 2013s to up until today. And today, the nice thing is that we can tell that there's roughly 4 or 5% of, give or take, 1,000 herds that report to us that report a break on a yearly basis. So for the listeners, that's 50 herds, 60 herds, give or take, that report a break on a given basis. Now, at the same time, that same data tells us how many of those herds remain in an unstable category or reach that naive category as time goes by. And today we have less than 1% of those herds actually in an unstable condition. So in other words, our breeding herds are quite healthy, which tells us that the U.S. swine industry has been successful at controlling and eliminating it.
And eliminating the virus on a pretty significant level. I mean, if you're talking about that many herds that actually are reporting a break, and yet there's only 1% that remain basically in that endemic kind of situation, we've got the tools already in place, the way it looks to me, that says we are eliminating the virus from these sow farms.
Exactly.
and then keeping them negative.
Exactly. All that effort has been reflected over time. Yes, the big major outbreak in 2013, 2014, very rapidly when the industry got together, they figured out, hey, this is all a matter of biosecurity. And I think they implemented all those measures, cleaning, disinfecting, transport, et cetera. And today, this is where we are. We're in a really, really good position to keep moving forward.
So, Cesar, do we have a sense for how many, in general, what percentage of the population would still do feedback and acclimatization, keep them still with the best intention immune, but still showing activity? Because those herds could still, even though we think they are stable, they could still be winning positive pigs. Do we get a sense for how many of those there might be?
That will be a one-digit number, Monse, and I want to say that that's going to be roughly a 5%, 10%, depending on how we count them. But that number continues to come down, right? As people improve their biosecurity, they improve their transport. I believe that number will continue to come down. So the interesting thing is that number continues to go down, but also when we look at that data, when we see those systems that are exposing gills, not all of the outbreaks are happening in that region, right? Some of the outbreaks are happening in regions in which they're high density, but there's no exposure, or the other way around, low density, and again, no exposure. So not necessarily exposure means that in that region, we're going to see a lot of activity, which is a good thing. Again, goes back to we're doing good things from a biosecurity perspective.
I think one of the things we got to remember is that it's been 12 years now, 11, 12 years since we had an epidemic and acute breaks of PD when it first entered the country. And so generationally, just about now, we've got a whole bunch of production people and veterinarians that haven't seen this epidemic explosion that can occur with huge losses, not only at the sow farm level, but at the wean to finish sites and nursery sites, especially for rate of gain, mortality rates. But yet it's still here. And in a naive population, we know this virus can raise havoc. Gordon, I was talking a little bit before to one of our colleagues that works with a herd in a area that doesn't have a lot of pigs, and yet by transport they got the virus in there in a sow farm. Mm-hmm. Naive population, they've lost 3 weeks totally of pig production, gone completely.
And that's the concern of the virus. We're talking at a national level here with Cesar's data, and thank you for sharing that data and the work you do and with your team to educate the entire industry. But you're right, Tom. This is still a problem at an individual farm level, still devastating from a viral pig diarrhea and high mortality, high morbidity in the farrowing house. And then that just transports, or it moves from that farrowing location to any site associated with that sow farm. So it's still impactful economically at the sow farm, and that's why I think the discussions about national elimination need to be encouraged.
And I think we have to remember how infective the virus is, right? I mean,
yes.
that it replicates rapidly. It doesn't take very much virus at all to start the explosion to occur, and then it sticks around for a long time.
Yeah. And when it explodes, there is a lot. That's the other thing. There is so much that then it's so easy to move it around to other places. So. Yeah.
Those characteristics you just described were there from the very beginning. And that starts the discussion about, hey, we need to eliminate this virus at a farm level. And then given Cesar's data of less than 1% of the populations that he's monitoring, gosh, the incidence rate is so low that we need to at least consider a national effort. And I think those considerations are ongoing.
We just had on a recent podcast Pete Thomas from Iowa Select Farms, and for our listeners and viewers, it'd be good to go back to that again, because he is showing already how you can change the dynamics of this disease within a heavily populated, dense area that they are located in get sites to go negative and keep them negative. And so their incidence rate is in their wean to finish sites has went from 20% to 2% just through the stuff, Cesar, that you talked about, the basics of biosecurity being the cornerstone of making this work.
And the other piece of information, Tom, there is a few years ago, one of my team members, Dr. Mariana Kikuchi, and the folks at Seaboard, they were trying to understand PEDV incidence in the growing pig, right? And they were having issues. They were trying to control that disease in their system. And they reached out to us and posed the question, how can we work together? Well, we look at their data. They were heavily monitoring those sites. And not until they made structural changes from segregating mortality handling equipment, et cetera, the incidence of that virus reduced dramatically in their system. So going back to your point, Tom, we can really, really hit this virus hard in the breeding herd and in the growing pig herd with basic biosecurity. Despite what Monse said, the pigs are really good amplifiers of PEDV, right? So we're really, really hitting the virus hard today.
So let's talk about that population of the wean to finish pigs, because that's the one that I feel like we know the least. And it's probably where we keep the virus being as a reservoir, right? Do you have a sense, Cesar? Do we know what percentage or grow finish pigs might be positive? Because to me, that's also an important piece of information, right? Because then the things about do we have sites that are negative? I heard that question one time. Somebody said, "Oh, PEDs in all the grow finish," and I don't think that's the case.
There's very little data on it, Mons. Unfortunately, I think that's where we have the big black box today, in the sense that we do not have good metrics of incidence, and not even metrics of prevalence. The closest we can get to that is ISU's swine disease reporting system data, in which they use the positivity rate as a good proxy of, hey, how much virus how much positive tests are coming out of the growing pig. And when you look at those graphs, which is good, we see the same seasonal effect. Hey, the highest is like 20% positivity rate during the winter season, right? So we know, okay, just like PRRS and other diseases, the winter is perhaps the fall and the winter are the seasons in which these viruses thrive. But again, like you said, those are the populations in which maybe we're just allowing the virus to recirculate. And perhaps this might be explained a little bit with transport, just what Pete talked about in the previous episode. So I think if we really fix transport, we may be able to hit that incidence probably in the growing pig side of things, right? So, but that's the closest we have. We have not a really good understanding of incidence.
But what we're talking about here now is a shift to a national elimination program. So, before we've talked about elimination at the sow farm, and that we've got the capability to do that. But now we've got this in front of us where we think the potential to make this a national elimination program. And the first thing I'd point out to everybody is that we know that is in the early stages working already in, I believe it's the province we talked about before, in is it Winnipeg? Is that right? Folks, do you remember? Is that
Manitoba, maybe perhaps?
Manitoba, yes. Yeah. And I think they're over a year into that program without any positives showing up that as they've worked to eliminate the virus from that province.
Yeah. And one of the main I think they've been really, really aggressive when it comes to monitoring as many moving pieces as they can, especially transport and slaughter plants, right? So I think they're really, really looking for that needle in the haystack, so that whenever they find it, they can do that trace back and start implementing the necessary interventions. So, and I think that's a good way to communicate to the region, to those participating in those programs, that, hey, if there's a problem here, let's figure out how to stay away from that virus, or how to change things in our biosecurity to keep it from reaching naive populations, right?
So maybe just we may want to remind our audience about PED. It's an orally, fecally transmitted disease, really, like the virus for the most part. It just gets in the feces. and a lot of it. So maybe we just back to the basic biosecurity, right? And maybe Gordon, with your experience in your system, would start with what? Having a site that it's clean. I'm thinking about I win pigs into a win to finish site that it's been completely clean, disinfected. Walk us through the steps that as a producer you would have to follow, just that basic biosecurity.
Well, nothing different for this virus than many of our other viruses, other than the fact that you are right. It's a great proxy because it is a fecal contamination. So washing, cleaning, washing, disinfecting are crucial steps that are done at the appropriate level, especially as Cesar has just pointed out on transport. And part of the issue in the U.S. industry is that the washing of the transport trucks, the market trucks. In the case of PED at the sow farm level, it's so critical at the wean pig transport and the cull sow transport. So you focus on those areas to the point that you even, at the height of the problem, you were separating truck washes to negative farms and positive farms just to make sure you did everything possible that you prevented cross-contamination in the transport area. So in some ways, nothing new here. It's just basic protocol, and follow the protocol, and then make sure you audit that the implementation of the protocol. And if you have PED being transmit problems, you're probably not washing properly. You're probably not following the protocol appropriately. And the appropriate steps should be taken to review your implementation.
So there's with an elimination, national elimination program. I know there's people that are saying, well, we've got a lot of hurdles to overcome here, and I think we could debate that for quite a while. There are hurdles, but are they ones we can't overcome? For instance, truck washes. And I know at a recent House of Delegates, we had a long discussion about what do we do about the fact we don't have enough truck washes from our packing plants to take care of all vehicles when they leave the plants, which we know is a major part of contamination, not only for this virus, but for other viruses, potentially like foreign animal diseases of ASF. So, but do we have the capability of putting more truck washes in? Absolutely. We got to bite the bullet and make a decision to do that, in my opinion. I've heard $2 a pig to get it done. I think we've got to get it done. I think it's something that has to happen in order for elimination to occur and the health of the pig to improve the way we want to. The other question that keeps coming up is well, should we wait for a vaccine to come in the market? And I don't know where you guys are at on that, but I question that. It seems like it may be a good insurance policy for concerns about non-immune populations having the potential to really break. But beyond that, do we really need it to eliminate the virus from the national population? Any thoughts you guys have on that?
That's a good question, Tom. And I feel, and this is again my opinion, I feel like with the success that the swine industry has been able to achieve up until today, I question whether we really need more tools, right? I think the tools that we have today have brought us to a level in which 90-something% of the breeding herd has been clean and remains clean, right? Now, the growing pig part of the puzzle, hey, I think Dr. Thomas has very basic information that shows a huge impact, and other systems do something similar, and they have been successful. So I feel like today, do we need more tools? I just have my doubts with it, because I think we are still in the route to success, right, with this virus.
Use the ones that we have already well.
Right.
One of the things we learned too, at least in the phase of the epidemic, it was the role of the feed too, right? I mean, the feed mills could get contaminated, and then feed being a fomite really that moves the virus. And I think that's something we also need to keep in mind. But again, the likelihood of feed mills to become contaminated will be less as we have less virus. But I think that's another point when we think about virus spread that I don't think we want to forget about it. But it's important to understand in those cases that the farms get infected, the timing and potentially the source, because there could be some of those events that are not associated with transport, and you still could have these odd introductions via feed or even people moving around sites or moving other things. So I want to bring that in the mind of the listeners, because I think that's one of the diseases where we saw feed really being, one of those possibilities. So if you had to, Cesar and Tom and Gordon, just leave this recording with a message to our audience about moving to the next step, if you have producer that is hesitant, what would you tell them?
Well, I think I would start from a perspective, we've been here before, and we've been able to do this before. The industry has the capabilities to eliminate difficult diseases from pig populations. Pseudorabies is one we've talked about before, as a prime example of that. And there was plenty of resistance to start with that program, but yet we did it. It was done, and it was done in a way that's impacted the industry tremendously in a positive way. So I would say we have the history, we do have the tools, as you said, Cesar, to get this done.
I think our individual farms are better without this virus. We know that, Monty, and I think the national herd is better without this virus. So I would continue to encourage all producers to be engaged in this discussion so that we get on a pathway for a national elimination.
And for me, I support what both Tom and Gordon have said, and I would just leave them with one key piece of metrics which we follow, and it's half of the breeding herds that we have in our program have never seen PEDV, right? Never. And then a small percentage of them have seen it. Well, I shouldn't say a small, 30% of them have seen it once. My message is, if we are concerned with, if I eliminate it today, what are the likelihood of me getting reinfected? It's very low. It's extremely low. So I think, again, that talks about the success that everybody in the industry, all their work is providing to keep this virus at bay. So I think, again, we are still on the road to success, and we have been successful. And hey, we just need to push a little bit further to get it done.
That's a very good message, Cesar. Thank you for that. And maybe just my last comment too is, good job on the sow farms. Let's keep it that way. Let's go back to focus now biosecurity in the grow finish, so that we don't spread it from the grow finish. So, and then if the little virus, hopefully very few virus that we have is still in the grow finish, we just get rid of it there. And then we continue improving on the biosecurity in grow finish. So with that, Cesar, great to see you. Thank you for joining us. See you next time at the meeting.
This episode is exclusively sponsored by Boehringer Ingelheim. The views, opinions, or positions expressed are those of the speakers and may not reflect those of any other organization.